My name's Boyce Harries. I'm a Kenyan coffee farmer, and I would like to talk a little bit about the varieties of coffee that you might expect to find in Kenya. First of all, of course, we grow Arabica coffee in Kenya, and there are about 4 or 5 varieties that you might come across with Kenyan coffees. Perhaps the oldest and most historical one is called French Mission. This is a variety that you would probably look at as the heirloom variety of East African commercially grown coffee. It was reintroduced back to East Africa, I guess it was probably around the late 1800s by French missionaries, and I guess that's also why it got its name, French Mission. It was developed in Nairobi, I believe, and at a mission, and launched and made available to farmers to plant commercially. Since then, other research and breeding facilities came about, one of which has become very famous in its day, Scott Laboratories, and from them you got a graduation of SL type coffees. These varieties were considered to have higher brightness and acidity, a cleaner cup, and perhaps a bit more blackcurrant, blueberry flavours. Whereas French Mission, with its Bourbon history, was perhaps a bit muted on the acidity levels and those fruit flavours that I've just discussed. Obviously, these varieties were bred for quality in terms of the cup, and as Kenyan coffee farming established itself, growers became more aware of the conditions that were involved in the various regions that Kenya grew coffee, and therefore a demand came about to be able to provide farmers, from an agronomic point of view, varieties that would suit their growing region. One of these that is well known is called K7. The K7 variety is useful to farmers because it is highly drought resistant, has very good root structure, and also it is resistant to rust. As we move on over the years, another variety in Kenya has come about. This was Ruru 11. Ruru 11 was developed with some Robusta history in its breeding and genetics, and I think that by achieving this, this allowed the breeders to bring in resistance to CBD as we know it. With its dwarf nature and its resistance to CBD, it is actually a very high yielding producer, and of course with the savings to a farmer in pesticides and also with the increased yield from a lack of loss through disease, it is of very good interest to a Kenyan coffee farmer. About 5 years ago, a new variety in Kenya was launched. It is called Baton. Baton is the name of Kenya's highest peak on Mount Kenya, and this variety is touted as a very interesting one because it is bred purely through the Arabica strain. However, it is supposed to continue the disease resistance of Ruru 11 without any connection to Ruru 11, and also have aspects of maybe the K7, where it has got drought resistance as well as rust resistance. Still early days, plantings have been limited, and therefore cupping this variety on its own is a little bit more of a challenge to get. Having done a run through of varieties that you could expect in Kenya, as you can imagine, in the estate sector, with the development of estates over several years, you will find on coffee estates in Kenya a mixed bag of varieties growing in their plantations. Chania estate is a little bit different perhaps to some of, or many of Kenya's coffee estates, in that we have retained the French Mission. And so today we find ourselves in a situation where we have coffee trees in excess of 90 years old, still producing, and 3/4 of our area on Chania estate has the French Mission variety. We do have the other varieties I've mentioned, which include the SLs, Ruru 11 and Baton, which has helped us to look at individual variety processing. This does require a bit of logistics at harvesting, but we are finding interesting results by separating out these varieties. And of course, with the volume of French Mission that we have, we've taken one variety and moved this a step forward and have processed this variety in 3 different ways. the natural process, which is very new, the honey process, which is very unique indeed in the East African context, and of course the traditional wash process by which most of Kenya's coffee is processed.